I'm Garrett McQueen.
I'm Scott Blankenship.
And this is TRILLOQUY, True and Real Stories from the Fringes of Classical Music. Namaste, Scott.
Namaste to you, Garrett.
I'm at a loss for words about this opus of TRILLOQUY. I mean, there's peace, there is power, there is love, there is emotion. We're exploring Indian classical music today. And I'll just start by saying, when I joined the board for the American Composers Forum, I met all types of really interesting people, and a woman named Nirmala was one of those folks. And in one of our early meetings, we were talking about how we define that phrase classical music, and I offered the idea of Indian classical music being far older than anything by Bach or even Handel.
Yeah.
And she was there in the room, and she came up and thanked me for my words, and we had a nice chat, and I decided that she needed to be on TRILLOQUY, and you facilitated that. So today we're going to hear stories about Indian classical music. We're going to actually hear some Indian classical music, of which I know very little. What's your experience with those sounds of sitars and all that sort of thing?
Well, in the interview, we talk about how there was a time where I studied with Jeff Ray, who is a slide blues guitarist, but he has some inspiration from Indian sounds.
Right.
And he has, like her percussionist had that drone app on his phone. He had a guitar pedal that did something similar, and he would do Indian sounding improvisation over that drone. Yeah. And I just get lost in it. I mean, absolutely lost in it. And it goes beyond what you were talking about, the love, the passion, the dedication that's all folded into this performance. To me, it was on another plane,
Absolutely.
Where you leave your body and you just sort of flow with the musician.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where I always hope that I just don't want it to end.
Absolutely.
I would like to ride that wave with them. As far as popular culture goes, the only thing that I can think of that it made its way in, Sting recorded a song called Desert Rose, which had some traditional Indian singing, and she did some of that in the interview too, that I just thought, keep going.
Yeah.
I just want to sit here and listen to you, Nirmala. Yeah, she was a tremendously positive person and loving person. You feel her aura all around her. She's just always smiling, always positive. What a great interview this was.
Yes, and she brought her friend Boopathi, who is a master percussionist in the Indian style, and one of the things I wanted to make sure I just touch on before we get into the interview is how Nirmala was talking about and Boopathi, how they were talking about how music is in moods and modes and not necessarily keys. And I forget the number she said, but there are thousands of them.
She knew it right off. It's like 3,471.
Yeah. And I just found myself so moved. My eyes were swelling up hearing her talk about the relationship between the spirit and the body and the music, how it's all connected. And then she, one of the songs that you'll hear her sing in the interview, kind of goes along the lines of life is a stage, and we're players, and for many reasons that tugs on my heartstrings. Thinking about the concept of that. Yeah.
And we all play many parts throughout the course of our individual plays.
Yeah. I mean, how about we just go ahead and get into this one?
I think that's the best idea we've had yet.
Nirmala and Boopathi, thank you so much for joining us today. Namaste.
Namaste. Vanakkam, as we say in Tamil.
Okay. Say that again for me.
Vanakkam.
Vanakkam. I'm going to do my best today. I'm going to butcher a lot of pronunciations. I'm sorry.
I think you do always a fabulous job. So,
Well, the first thing I wanted to sort of talk about before we really dig into the topic is the idea of being this cultural representative. So for me, as a Black musician, people always want me to speak for Black musicians. And I'm sure, with something as unique as the music the two of you play, maybe that's a part of what you've experienced in the past as far as your presentations and interviews. I'm curious.
Yes and no, not in a big way, but definitely in some ways, as soon as they particularly see me with my instrument, that provokes a lot of questions and interesting questions because it's quite unique when you play a 2,000-year-old instrument and you travel with it. And for me, it's an absolute honor and privilege to play something that's that old. And yet, that's something that's thriving and so dynamically developing over the years, because it's certainly not in the shape and form it was 2,000 years ago. So yes, you're right. I do get asked about coming from the East Indian, South Indian, if I may, cultural tradition and playing an instrument and living in the United States of America, in Minnesota. You know, all these are tremendous areas for opening up and sharing, because many times we find when people play Indian classical music, they are, if they live in the States, which is rare itself, when you're a professional, you kind of live in your country where you're trying to put yourself on the map. And I am not doing that. So that's the first thing. But I have to say I'm blessed to be in Minnesota, and I'm thrilled that this has been my home for 25 years, and I'm able to travel. Otherwise, people settle down on the East or West Coast, particularly California, New York, New Jersey, you know, where there's a very big concentration of the East Indian population, if I may. And then Minnesota doesn't figure on that list, at least did not figure on that list. But now Minnesota is a hub hopping with activity in the Indian classical dance and music scene. And we can't even keep up with the number of events that come to town. There's so many happening every weekend. And I don't know whether it's that these people that moved in the past 10, 15 years loved the cold particularly, but for some reason...
Weird.
Many reasons, actually. Weird. We have gotten used to seeing a lot of activity. So I've kind of become known for a musician that lives in a country far away from India, but still playing professionally and traveling. And you have to feel incredibly lucky about it. I mean, the stars must have aligned in a big way. And we always say in the Indian culture, the blessings of your previous generation and elders shower heavily on you.
Oh, wow.
So the good things that my parents and my grandparents and ancestors and my teachers have all done, we get to bear, have the fruit. The tree was planted a long time ago and they did good things. So I believe I'm getting the benefit of all of that.
Wow. You mentioned just a few moments ago that you feel blessed to be able to carry on this tradition. And I'm curious if you could talk a little bit more about that, because I don't know if I've spoken with any other musicians that talk about their music being a blessing. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So can you talk, both of you, if you could talk a little bit about what it means to carry this music forward?
Sure. I say that with absolute truth in every sense of the word, because for a 2,000-year-old oral tradition to survive and thrive, the first thing is the fact that we have the oral transmission of it from generation to generation. So that is the first thing about Indian classical music. And to receive that, one needs to have the best of the teachers. One needs to have the best of the guidance from the home that will take you to the best teachers. So that was a big blessing, that I got the best teachers for both vocal, music, and my instrument. So I got to learn from many, many great teachers, performers, and therefore I feel blessed on that account. The second thing is, when I began to study music, yes, I dreamt of being a professional musician from the age of maybe 3 or 4. I would stand on anything that looked remotely like a stage, find even a vegetable that looked like a microphone, a long cucumber or gourd, snake gourd. There's a big thing in India, a very long vegetable called the snake gourd, which literally looks like a snake, a long snake. I would hold all of that as microphone cables and sing away to glory or imagine myself. But practically speaking, I went to school, took music privately, lessons, passed many exams privately, but always went to school, got my master's in systems management and computer science.
Oh, nice.
Yes, and began a half-done PhD in artificial intelligence in England, thinking naively that I could do both. Be a professional musician, which I began when I was age 13. I played my first solo of about 2 to 3 hours concert in Bangalore, India. And then we did all the things anybody would do, like going to school, going to undergrad, grad, and all of that, and thinking I could do both. I really needed a lot of blessing first to be able to carry on my music, having a second office-going job, that was a big blessing. So I got the opportunities even as I was working. Then to have a family and raise 2 children. And then finally to leave India and Chennai, which is the hub for South Indian classical music, and go living all over the world, including England and Switzerland, and then finally in Minnesota, and still dream of being a musician. Wouldn't you agree? I must have had a lot of blessing
Absolutely.
to make these dreams come true, and a lot of people's positive energies supporting me. Some of the blessings that I have to count on my teachers, my parents, of course, my grandpa, my extended family of uncles, aunts, my sister, but my husband, Rajasekar, who had no clue what hit him when we got married, because the poor man thought I was a computer engineer, like he was.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go to office and come home and play the veena for entertainment, maybe, and for fun. But he never imagined that he was going to go on buses in England carrying this big thing, because I had no case for it in those days. I didn't even plan all that. The universe just gave me things as it kept going. And then, of course, to carry it and bring it back from England, which he said he would never do on a ship ever again. And I needed to get a case for it. We brought it back on a cardboard box, I mean, of all things.
wow.
Because I knew nothing more than that at those ages. I was 23 or 24 years old. And then, of course, I learned along the way that things have to fall in place. I still continued to work the job that I did, and go to work and enjoy my work at the office and do supply chain management and all kinds of things in the computer world. Before I said, I'm kind of feeling like I'm shortchanging the children and I'm shortchanging my practice of music and teaching. I loved it that I got up at 4 and went to bed at 12, but I just felt I still couldn't get enough practice and take care of the kids better. So when my son came into 9th grade, my husband and I, we took this big decision to give up that big job with a big hefty pay packet and go back to music. And the universe blessed me with the Bush Fellowship. I had no idea I would win it that year. That was the same. I quit my job in March. I went to my company and said, give me a part-time job. And they laughed and said, each of you are doing 2-3 people's jobs. Because right after Y2K, they let go a lot of people. So they said, Nirmala, go back, take some time off, come back, we'll give you a job. And so I left with that assurance. But then a month later, the Bush Foundation blessed me with that fellowship, which helped substitute somewhat that pay packet that I was not going to get right away. Soon we learned that I could keep doing this, and I was feeling much happier. I was being more of an efficient chauffeur to my children, because that involved a lot of driving kids around, and I didn't feel like I was compromising them. I was practicing. And then, of course, that was about 15 years maybe ago, or 14 years ago. And I've been since. I've made a few tours around the country, a few tours around the globe. And my position in India is becoming more secure, if I may, but if you can ever call security as a word in the musician's bag.
Right, especially as a musician.
As a musician. I just hope and pray that I will be blessed to continue playing as long as I'm around. As long as I'm around, I wish I can have most of my hearing.
Yes.
And if possible, my eyesight. And if possible, the capacity to sit cross-legged and play. If not, sit on a chair and play at some point. If I can't sit down. But I really would like to play and sing till the very last minute that, I have to leave the earth. Sounds morbid, but that's truly my dream. And I'm greatly humbled by the support I've received from the community here in Minnesota, around the world, my own home, for me to continue this journey. Miles and miles to go before I sleep. I know I'm taking out of Robert Frost, but that used to be one of my favorite lines. And these woods are dark and deep, particularly when they're snowed down, but I love them.
Yes.
I love them. Boopathi should probably tell us about his thoughts about it. Could you touch upon your Gurukula a little bit?
Actually, same thing Nirmala said. I'm very blessed to have this music profession as a mridangam artist. So from childhood, I'm very passionate about this rhythmic patterns with the drums. So that's why I came to this line. My instrument called South Indian drum is mridangam. Mridangam. So it's a king of percussion for the South Indian classical music art form.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm enjoying my profession. About my childhood until today, I'm practicing and being with all the artists and playing with them, with my gurus, my teachers' blessings. I playing with all stalwarts in South Indian classical music and also North Indian artists, as well as Western friends. Because of Nirmala, she introduced a lot of Western artists, so to work with them. So we collaborate a lot of albums and gigs, everything. So I toured a lot since 91. I will be out of country about 6-7 months. So for the concert tour.
And is this in India or everywhere?
Everywhere, all over the world.
Oh, wow.
Where is music is happening, so most probably I will be there. That's my teacher's blessing and Swami's blessing. So
Nirmala said that she was making music with anything she could find when she was young. So what was your first drum? Was it a pot in the house?
That's a bench.
Really?
Yeah, that's about Amul.
Yeah.
Dabba box.
So
milk powder dabbas, everything. And just I stand somewhere else. I just hit something.
Were there other musicians in your family to give you your first lessons?
Yeah. My uncles are all the musicians.
Yeah.
It's called Nadaswaram and Tavil. It's a traditional, what we can say?
Temple instruments.
Okay.
They are very loud. Nadaswaram is a wind instrument. You will see it.
It's open air instruments.
Open air.
Nadaswaram and Tavil.
Okay.
It's an open air instrument. Traditional temples and marriage.
They're outdoor instruments used in temples for services. Now also concert hall. Now they have come into the concert hall. The tawil is a very powerful drum. I mean, it's like the taiko drum in many ways. It's very powerful. And they have to wear special caps on their fingers, which are made of paste and dried. So it's really strong. And when they play that on one hand and a stick on the other, it's very powerful. The mridangam that Boopathi Anna plays is played with the fingers. There's no extra, accompaniments to his fingers. But there they have a stick on one hand. It's just mind-blowing. And it's very loud. So outdoors seem to suit really well. But these days they have concerts of these instruments. They are used in marriages. They're used in temple processions. And Boopathi Anna's uncles were very renowned musicians. Your father was a very well-known movie director and playwright and musician himself.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I'm curious about, we're using this phrase classical music and Indian classical music. I think I've told you the story. I'll tell it very quickly. Before I entered the music profession, I worked for a cab company, and as I was leaving, the owner of the cab company told me, well, I know a lot about Indian classical music, but not much about Western, so I'm curious to learn more. And that was the first time that a light bulb went off in my mind. Wow, that phrase classical music doesn't just refer to what we Westerners think of as classical music. I'm curious, how do you apply that phrase classical music? What is your opinion on the phrase classical music?
Thank you for asking, Garrett, because that is sometimes a question that I get asked a lot is Indian music folk? Do you have a classical? Because classical in the West comes across as a Western tradition.
Right.
And I didn't realize this for a very long time because I grew up in India and I didn't leave the shores of India till I was 16. But that was my first time when somebody asked me that question because I grew up around Indian classical music. When we were little children, the tradition was you take your kids to either dance or music privately or painting or something like that, give them a fine art. But typically it was dance and music.
Sure.
Classical Indian dance, classical Indian music. This is what families would do for their children, and that's how my induction happened too. So the word classical, I'm asked this a lot too. What do you define as classical? I think is something that's been around for a long time, something that has a very strong grammar, whose rules are fairly strict. And I think this can apply to many classical traditions because we have rules, we have grammar, and we've been around for a bit. But the Indian classical tradition did take a lot from the folk. There are ragas, which we know. Raga means a melody with a scale going up and down, but basically it's emotion. A raga is an emotion. And South Indian music technically has 34,776 ragas.
Holy smoke.
Okay.
Yes, but Scott, wouldn't you say we as human beings have much more than 34,776 emotions?
Sure.
Because a raga is an
makes sense.
emotion.
Sure.
So you're happy, you're somewhat happy, you're very happy, you're greatly happy, you're thrilled. This itself is 4 ragas because they're all not the same. So that's what the raga system is. Anyway, I was talking about the raga system, but that's a classical
Sure.
idiom. But ragas came from the folk tradition. So there are some ragas which came from working in the fields and the joy of standing out in the open and transplanting rice. There's a song for that. There's songs for going out fishing on the open seas, and that's a folk. But then those things have come into our concert methodology or our concert repertoire, if you may. And some ragas came in and have become very classical versions of those folk ragas. Ananda Bhairavi is one of those ragas, which they say is Sanjurutti. There's another raga, which is a folk, but we use it in very classical terms also. It has a folksy look at it too. So the line does blur when you start bringing in life into music, because ultimately this is all about the human space, the human spirit, and the human experience. So ragas are nothing more than the everyday representation of the human experience in my book.
Maybe there's a raga for, meeting new friends.
Yes, I'm
and
sure
coming together for the first time.
Shall we try singing together? No, just kidding. We could, because, how is your day today? After all, we can translate that into a melody. It's raining.
Sure.
So that could be a certain set of notes. So there's valor, there's bravery, and there's all these really different emotions, but there's also very close, related feelings, thoughtful, deeply thoughtful, pensive. You could get into that space and really start playing around. Ultimately, I may sing it in a certain way, feeling something, but you may experience something quite different from my music. Ultimately, it's what we perceive and what we take away with us.
A friend of mine once said that in this music, whereas Garrett and I, with a musician, with an instrument, might play in a key, in this music, it's more you play in a feeling. Is that what I'm gathering from what you said?
There's definitely that, but if you'd really started talking grammar, you will see when I play today, we have what is called a basic tone, a pitch. That could be also construed as a key, but the entire concert will be played in that basic tone, being, say, E is the tonic. We build the ragas with that E.
I think maybe in the Western tradition we will call that a drone.
Yes.
Okay.
And I would love to use that word. I just didn't go there, but that's the drone.
Oh, okay.
That's really
Okay,
the
great.
drone.
Got it.
And the Indian music's mother, they say, is Shruti, which is the word for drone. And the father of Indian music, they say, is Laya, which is basic rhythm. Not a measured 6-beat, 3/4. It's not that. It's just the rhythm that we all have going in here. And when that heart does not go properly, then we have the opposite of laya, which is avalaya, which is something not okay.
Yeah.
So Indian music believes that there is order in the universe. And that order, whatever that be, is the basis of the father of the music. So it's a very familial system, mother and father and all of that. But they say that because the role of parents is also very highly revered in the society. The role of the teacher, the guru, and the role of the parents. The guru is said to be that light which you switch on when you get into a room to see what is in that room. But really, that room is you. Without the light, we don't see this room. But just imagine, once we put on the light, I can see the speakers, I can see the microphones and all of that. If we were this room, the guru is that spark that awakens in us what is us, really. They are just awakening who we are. So it is so important to find the right guru to realize ourselves. I just find this concept so mind-blowing that the guru is remover of ignorance. Gu and ru exactly means that. Remover, dispelling darkness, removing ignorance.
I'm writing that down.
I'm I have to say I'm getting really moved by how you can't separate this music from the culture and from the feeling of being a person. But Pati, I wanted to go back to the idea of playing in a mood. How do you? What is the relationship between how you feel in a moment and the music you're playing? Can you play a happier sounding raga if you're actually a little sad, or if you're actually a little angry? What is the relationship between those two things?
Actually, when we are playing with a song, it's like a happy mood, or it's very sad, or it's very spiritual. So the raga, they composed with a song that like mode. So same thing, we have to adapt that mood in with our body and fingering, everything. We have to apply for the song. So actually on the stage, we have to play or accompaniment the artist is not only for the thala, not only for the song. Is we have to play for the mood of the song and raga and the ambience. So together we have to observe it, and we have to reproduce with our art.
Sure. And Scott, what I'm thinking about right now is that if I go on stage and play, let's say, a Brahms symphony or a Tchaikovsky symphony, the way I feel has very little to do with the notes that I'm playing. And again, I'll say it again, I'm so moved by how the relationship between body and spirit and music and setting. It's an incredible thing for me to think about.
Absolutely. There is a composition we were talking about. This weekend I was out in a concert in a different state, and we were talking about this piece, which translates to, you're going to laugh when I tell you this because you've heard this already elsewhere. All the world is a stage. We are but players, and we are mere actors, etc., etc. You know where I'm coming from.
Yep.
This is not from As You Like It, but this is from a 13th century Indian composer.
Thank you for clearing that up for us.
Called Annamacharya, who lived in South India. And he wrote about the Supreme. And he said, we are mere actors. The song's melody has been composed in such a beautiful way. I'm just going to randomly sing. Please. I don't have a G on me right now.
There's an app for that.
Yes, yes. I Tanpura. Isn't it Apple? So it's all about the me.
I'm going to write that down.
I Tanpura. It's a much better app than some of the other ones. G sharp kurturman. Give me A flat. Yeah, it's morning, so it's better. నాటి బదుకు నాటకము కానది కన్నది కైవల్యము నాటి బతుకు నాటకము నాటకము పుట్టుతయు నిజము పోతయు నిజము పుట్టుతయు నిజము పోతయు నిజము నగి నగి కాలము నాటకము పుట్టుతయు నిజము పోతయు నిజము నగి నగి నీ పని నాటకము ఎగువన శ్రీ ఎగువన శ్రీ వెంకటేశ్వరుడేలిగే గగనము మీదిది కైవల్యము నాటి బతుకు నాటకం. I was just using that as an example to say Nanati Baduku Natakamu means all the world is a stage. Nataka is the word for a play. You know. Kanadi, Kannadi, what we see, what we don't see are parts of this play. Kaivalyamu. Then he goes on to say, Pututayu Nidzamu, Potayu Nidzamu. Nidzamu means truth. Pututayu is we are born. That's the truth. Potayu is we're going to go. That's the truth. Nagi Nagi Kalamu. What is laughing though, because we are playing a game in between, is Kalam, which is time. Mm-hmm. Here's time sitting and laughing at us. Not when we don't realize what is it that we are feeling. But what we do know that there is somebody up there, maybe, pulling the strings, and we are merely puppets. And he's up there. The blue sky is the limit for all of this. But I just sang a little bit of that song just to say, we are born, we have to go. But in between, what happens is this play. And there's time sitting there and having a mighty hearty laugh about the whole thing. And the music that I just sang is poetry from the 13th century in the language Telugu. Most beautiful South Indian language. There are 5-6 languages in which we sing South Indian classical music, like classical Western music, which is sung in so many different languages.
Sure, Italian,
German, French, English, and so many other languages. So we need to know the language. That's important. And when we play this song, the way it's accompanied, as he says, mind, body, and spirit, the drummers have to play it in such a way that the rhythm enhances this feeling.
Yes.
There is almost a feeling of very pensive thinking, but also something very freeing about this melody, I feel, that there is an answer there. Don't feel like you have to take these responsibilities of your actions. I almost feel the composer is giving a validation of, hey, I'm merely a player, so I can't really be responsible for my actions.
Okay, yeah,
I
that's
almost feel like there's another perspective to that by saying somebody else is controlling it. So in some ways, it'd be better if you just surrendered yourself to that being. Let him take care of you. Then you will be going, the right path. Don't think you are doing anything here. In some ways, there's also that duality of that meaning, I think.
One of the things, as I sat and listened to you sing, one of the things that I love about this style of music is the fact that, like in classical music that we're used to and that Garrett plays on stage, it has corners. You're supposed to play it a certain way.
Yeah.
Whereas when I heard you singing, there were times where it felt like you were in between notes.
Yes.
Or at least in between what we would consider
notes. And where that might be undesirable in this sort. But here, it's part of it. And I love that aspect of it. And there's also an improvisational aspect to it, correct?
True. I improvised even now.
Oh, wow.
In a big way.
That is so wonderful. So that,
thank you.
if you were to give two concerts, one right after the next, they would be so drastically different, wouldn't they?
Yes, they would be. Even
I
this
love that.
piece would be different, not in a big way, because the basic emotion, I have to stay true to the intent of the composer of what he's trying to say here, or what he has said and gone many centuries ago. But there will be changes here and there. I have to say this. You said something so beautifully, which my professor, my teacher, Professor T.R. Subramaniam of Delhi University, would be smiling down on you, Scott, now. Because he always said, and what Garrett said about what we say notes, I like that too.
Yeah.
My teacher always said it so beautifully. He said, Indian music is music between notes. It is a journey. He always would say, we're going to take a train in Delhi. Those days we took more trains than planes, and we would land in Chennai, which is Madras. You know, the old name was Madras. It's back to its original name of Chennai, which is where I was born. We all know that. So we start on note A, and we're going to go to note Z. We know this, but we are going to touch so many stations on the way. So what is this journey like between this start and this end? And then the small station. So what happens between journey A, Delhi, and the next station, which comes some other station? What happens there? Did you have a coffee? Did you find tea? Was the weather good? Was the food good? Because the stations are known for their food too. Indian railway stations used to be known for specialities. So, okay, you're going to get that. So what is your anticipation like? You're going to get this really wonderful thing to eat when you reach the next one. But how was the journey between the notes? So that is the beauty of Indian music, he says, because we all know we are going to go to the airport or train station and start here and reach there. But, you know, was TSA nice to you today? Did they open your baggage? Did they put it back like you packed it?
Right.
These are things I think about in every journey because I travel with the instrument and my heart is in my mouth most of the time when I'm traveling.
So can you explain for us like a raga, some raga called Kalyani or something?
Okay.
Can the Aroganam, Avaroganam, and how
the curves.
you
Yes, would you give me that drone? I'll be happy to talk about it. He says,
and while he's pulling the drone, you know, I'll just say, you know, you talk about your teacher smiling down on Scott. You know, my dear chamber music teacher who's now gone, Professor Weiss. He used to say all the time that music is the space between the notes. So even the fact that you know, our, you know, Western music is a little more rigid. You know, that concept is still there, but in the Indian tradition, that space is just explored so much more thoroughly.
yes, and I have to say something here, Garrett. I am blown away by Western music, and I'll tell you why. I come from a tradition, a classical tradition, that has the very important concept of linear melodic progression, which is we do one note, as I'm going to demonstrate, then go to the next note, then go to the next note, because we are used to doing this by ourselves. We don't have a whole big group of musicians that we work with a different concept. They are all going to be following the path set by the lead. If you were listening to what Boopathi ji was saying a little while ago, he said, we have to accompany the mood of that song. And that song is chosen by the person sitting in the center, which will be somebody like me playing the veena or singing. And the drummers and the violin accompaniment, everybody follows that, but we're all on that melodic exploration, linear. So one note at a time, we climb like that. We don't do this parallel processing, as I call it, coming from the computer world, in the harmony type of representations when C is being sung there, somebody is doing a B here, somebody else is doing a different tone somewhere else on a different instrument, like your bassoon. Wow, I love that instrument. So people do it differently. At the same point of time, we have sounds coming from different sources that all sound so beautiful together. I've always wondered about the mind of those great classical composers of Western music on how can they think in these parallel paths and imagine. Till I became a composer myself, I appreciate it even more now when I write for Western instruments because that was not my training. So I have to think outside the box, and I love that challenge, which is how I made my collaborative album last year that released Maitri, The Music of Friendship. When I wrote, I had to think of how would Pat O'Keefe play this on, how would it sound on the saxophone, as opposed to Michelle Kinney on the cello? And how will I bring my veena in here to complement them? How will Boopathi play? How will Tim O'Keefe play? Or if I work with a different classical musician, then I'm thinking, how are they going to play? How is that instrument going to sound? I never had to do all that. I was selfishly always thinking about my veena and the sound of my veena and what can I do with my veena. Now, when I think about these compositions, I said, those composers have to be so good at those different instruments and be masters at them to create such masterful works. So I'm saying this because this has always been something that I admire and respect about the classical tradition of the West, because it's a completely different paradigm that it's working from, as opposed to the Indian tradition, which I simplify by saying linear melodic progression of notes.
I'd like to ask you a question about collaboration, because I studied slide blues guitar with a local instructor here named Jeff Ray. And he turned me on to a recording called A Meeting by the River. Have you heard?
Is it by Chaurasia?
It's Rai Cooter and Vishwa Mohan Bhatt.
Vishwa Mohan Bhatt, yes, I've heard it.
And that was such a discovery. I didn't think about how well a steel guitar from the Delta would work with your instruments from India. Have you ever made a collaboration with a guitarist like that?
Yes. I'm trying to remember with who did I play with the steel guitar. I'm trying to remember. I'm blanking out now. I could get you that name very easily, but he's from Philadelphia. And when I was in Australia, he was at that time working for BBC in Perth. So we had a session. I'm trying to remember, was it a pedal guitar or a steel guitar that he brought? Yes, to answer your question, coming back to which guitar that I know really well with collaboration is our local Minnesota master, Dean Mcgraw.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Dean Mcgraw and I have played a lot together.
Oh, nice.
And at the Cedar and some other venues. And most recently, we were at the State Capitol celebrating Mahatma Gandhi together. And Dean is a master at improv and a great artist with whom I've had the honor of working. So acoustic guitar, yes. I worked with Steve Cole, another fabulous from the Brass Kings.
Yeah.
I have worked with Anthony Cox, the master bass player. And we have a band called Carnatic Energy. So I have been very lucky. So if I start thinking now, I can start giving you names of people I've worked with. And another instrument that blows my mind away is, of course, the saxophone, clarinet, and the wind family. But the guitar is like the Indian cousin is the veena. Guitar's Indian cousin is the veena.
I was curious as to how musicians from our more American tradition would meld with yours.
The main thing is, first, they wish to do it. If somebody wants to do it, then they're already realizing what is it that might take to do. And they are very, very generous. In Minnesota, that way is a great place for that. And when we sit down to play, one of the things we talk about is the drone, that philosophy of how I work with the drone and if that can be done. And the second important idea is improvisation or improvisation. Forgive my accent. I've lived too many places in the world to have anything proper. I mix and match. But when they improvise, if they like to improvise, then this is the place to go, because then a lot of it is improvisation and improvisation.
In the Western world, especially here in the United States, there's this big struggle and this big push to keep classical music, quote unquote, relevant and to pass it on to the next generation. Is that an issue in your experience with this music being so closely related to the culture of South India? It seems like it will always be there, considering its history.
Yes. And I feel like I should say yes to the answer, but I have to say there's always this big question mark. Will this continue? Will this continue? Because we being, all of us classical musicians, is a smaller group of people. It's already a niche kind of a group. Yeah. And that's true for Indian classical music too. It's definitely not as popular as Bollywood, or India has so many different music making parts of the country. We have Collywood and Tollywood and all of that in India. So it's definitely not in that popularity zone at all. So we are worried about that. But I have to say, it fills me with hope that when I begin teaching and I say I'm ready to take on students, my numbers are forever growing, and we have to close registration at some point for private lessons because that tells me that our parents, parents being our community parents, are interested in keeping and propagating this art. I have many parents who have come to me who said, we didn't receive this opportunity when we were growing up, or we didn't take it seriously enough when it was given to us. So now we want to give our children this opportunity. Will you teach our children? And there's nothing more satisfying than have the next gen perform and
I love
sing.
that. Yeah.
And I'm not saying they all have to become professional musicians like me. That's not very practical because we need an audience too.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if they found a friend in music, then I consider myself very lucky to have given them that taste for a friend for life in music.
Yeah.
You know, go home and come back from work and pick up your instrument or sing or play the drums or find a safe place for yourself where you can be yourself and come out of it energized and positive to take on the next day. That's all we look for. And I do have to say, I have about 10 or 15 young people, including my own daughter, who's my disciple, who have become musicians, boldly become musicians. Just yesterday, we were discussing this when we were sitting in an airport, Boopathi and I, about the future. It's a very tough profession. And I came home and the discussion continued with my husband because my daughter is studying music and doing a second master's in music. And my husband is like, are you sure this is going to sustain? Where's she going to get insurance from? And practical things like that. And I don't have answers, but I have faith. And I just told him, I'm being foolish maybe in saying this, but Boopathi said she's a very hardworking kid. She's going to do well in everything because he had the same doubt when she went to Princeton to study molecular biology and practically went into music as a major now. That switched. She became a music major with a minor in vocal performance. And of course, she had neuroscience because she wants to connect the brain and music at some point, right? But she's a composer, a Minnesota-born, raised composer now, and studying music now. That's what she's doing. So we were talking about the practicality of it, Garrett. I know you asked about tradition continuing, but I'm talking more practically.
Of course.
Because I don't
real
know,
life.
for real life, I don't know which of my students are going to become professional musicians, but some of them are already telling me they want to. And I have told them, you got to travel a lot, you have to work all the hours. Every day is a vacation, every day is a work day.
Absolutely, yeah.
So
yeah,
you
I
never
know
know.
that story.
I can't tell you the number of composers I've talked about on the air that when they first went to university, they were studying law or
Right.
something else before they switched over. So you tell your daughter that there's plenty of famous composers that have all the reverence in the world that were supposed to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
I mean, I started as an English major myself.
There
so,
you go.
Yeah.
And my background, if you know, computer science, and
Right.
look at me sitting here and talking about music the whole time. So I truly believe the universe will provide, and I also believe music will provide. I have this faith, and Boopathi always says that. He says, if you work hard, that work ethic, if you have a positive attitude and belief and love with a passion and work with a passion, it's not enough to just love with a passion. We got to back it
yeah.
up with some serious work.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if we taught or 100 students, so we are getting out of 100, there will be 2 musicians and 98 listeners.
Sure, sure. yeah.
So important.
Yeah.
That's why
I'm
we
not upset at
survey
that.
our music art form.
We survive it like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, we're definitely going to listen to some music, but I have one more question.
Sure.
So, Nirmala, when we met at the American Composers Forum convening, I remember you talking to me about how important it is not just for the music to have a place and visibility, but the traditional dress also to have, to be visible. And the both of you are in a traditional dress right now. I'm curious about the importance and the relationship between that and the performance of the music.
Absolutely. I believe that it's important to look and feel your best first every time. And it's our responsibility when we're in front of so many people also to represent the art form in every possible manner, visually and musically. And as musicians, as you know, the dancers, I envy them because they've got this great jewelry and this great costumes. And when they come and stand on stage, the Indian classical ones, or any dancer for that matter, you just like, this is so beautiful.
For what it's worth, your jewelry is also very beautiful.
Thank you very much. That's so kind of you. But the point is that we don't, as musicians, we don't move around. We don't express with, all these great emotions. They use the human body completely. We use it in a different way. We're static. We're sitting on stage. We don't move around much. And I think photographers, when they photograph musicians, they have to find some really interesting angles.
Yeah.
But dancers, you can get all of that. So that's the first point, that we need to be dressed in the right way, because I also believe it's part of the experience. The second thing I believe is when you get dressed like this, you prepare yourself mentally also as you're getting ready for the process.
That makes sense. Yeah.
When I even use the example of when you go to church, you are having a special time, you think, to go and commune as a community and talk to God, or by yourself, whatever it is. You light a candle, you light a lamp. That act is putting your mind in a different place, I believe. And just like that, getting ready and looking like, you want to perform. And the whole act of getting ready, the 10 minutes that you prepare yourself, or 15 minutes, readies you and puts you in the moment of performance. So I believe the clothing and the attire is as much important and a true representation of the culture. And I tell you, Garrett, these are so comfortable. You try sitting in jeans and playing the veena. You sit down in jeans and play the veena. I'm not very comfortable with that. I like my loose pants. I don't like tight clothes when I'm sitting down there. So this is extremely comfortable. It's like a skirt. You wrap around some clothing around the skirt and you sit down, and it's very freeing to play. So I think this is also a comfort factor, selfishly.
Sure. And before we hear the two of you play a little music, if there's someone who has never experienced Indian music before, other than, of course, looking up and buying your albums, what should a person search for? What would you say is a good starting point?
A good one would be to first listen to different instruments of Indian music, including the voice. So go and Google or search on Carnatic music, Indian classical music, put down different instruments. First look for the names, then find the names, make a note of them, go look for artists playing the veena or playing the Saraswati veena, which is how my instrument is called, or the mridangam or vocal or violin or flute, because you will find a whole list of them. And then when you start listening, then you will start feeling, listen to a few. So there's different styles. So you may not exactly hit the best thing right away. Because as you know, Google doesn't have quality control. So you can just get something and they may not be your best experience. So just Google out these various things, search it out, and then figure out what might appeal to you and start following. Slowly listen. But I have to say, go to a concert in person.
Sure.
Nothing like the live experience. I mean, this conversation, I don't know if it would have happened better in a different way, but except to sit with you and actually talk to you. It's a very different thing, watching your faces and saying, whatever you're giving me in assurance or confirmation or, I should change my tactics. This is not working, whatever.
I don't know if you've ever met a friendlier audience than what you have in front of you right now.
This is the best. This is the best. And such an, lovely way to just talk about things. I didn't come here with any ideas of what we might talk, but you made me feel so comfortable. That's the same thing for an audience member. You go there, sit there, don't have any expectation, just see what you get. And there's enough venues in town, in Minnesota and other countries and other places in the States to get live music. So anything go live. That is never to be duplicated. That's the beauty of Indian music too. If you see a YouTube recording, you're going to find somebody talking or playing that day, talking in music, I mean, of what they felt that moment, and somebody's camera capturing that. There's so many variants in there. You didn't get the live experience. So if I were them, I would just head out to a concert hall. I would do that. If I want to experience anything that I've never experienced, I do my homework, but I try and make it to a concert or a play or whatever it is, but a talking or reading in person to
Well, I'm ready to experience some of that now.
We are ready to play for you.
Nirmala and Boopathi, thank you so much. This has been a blessing to me. I've been so moved by this entire conversation. So thank you so much for the work that both of you are doing, and thank you for coming to sit with us today. Again, namaste.
Namaste. And may I say thanks for your show. Your podcast is a very popular one among my circles of friends, and I'm just thrilled there's a space for this in our world today. So to both of you, Scott and Garrett. And of course, I'm very honored to be on your show. Nobody could ask for a better Monday morning.
We're so glad to have you.
Thank you so
glad
much.
to have you here.
Thank you so much.
performances there by Nirmala and Boopathi, our special guests today on this opus of Triloquy. I'm not sure what I'm going to name this one. I might have to do some research on Hindi. Maybe I'll find the Hindi phrase for that. Life is a stage, and
Okay.
we're all players.
Yeah.
So that's soon to come. What a performance! What an experience!
It's just, I just wish that everybody listening could have been in the room
Yeah.
for that 5 to 10 minutes that they were playing. I mean, I was running the video camera, but I was somewhere else. My body was here, but I was riding whatever wave they were on.
Yeah.
Right along with them.
And, after we turned off the mics and as Nirmala and Boopathi were, packing up and getting their instruments together, we got back on the conversation of mood and how that plays a role in the music, but also, how day-to-day life can be kind of ugly and how music like this really, can help center you and help put you back into your mind in a positive way. And Nirmala used this phrase. She said that when people hurt people, they don't mean it, or they might not necessarily mean it. And hearing her say things like that, and hearing her perform and listening to that music, really gave me a introspective look into some of the things that are going on in my life. And I think we all should just practice more patience. I certainly need to do that. I know when people hurt my feelings for whatever reason, they may not mean it. I'm feeling so many emotions today, based on what's going on in my life on the outside. And then, hearing this music and hearing Nirmala talk about the relationship between the heart and the spirit and the body and what you put out into the universe. What an incredible way to spend a day today.
I think that the fact that she left a really lucrative career in order to follow this music and to take on so many students, to send
so
out
many that they can't take more. She was
Right.
talking about how they had to shut the doors because there were so many people interested.
I'm 100% in awe of the work that she has put in to play that instrument, because she took some time to show me the different parts and how it was made. There's the fretboard has beeswax. There's an artist's inlay of gold leaf paper. She has altered that instrument to be able to break it down and travel. There's a pickup installed in it so that she can be amplified.
And it applies to much, it definitely applies to Nirmala and Boopathi's stories, but I think it applies to the broader conversation of classical music, whether you consider that Western, if you're talking about the classical music of India or anywhere. Behind every performance, behind every recording is a lifetime of sacrifice, of blood, sweat, and tears, of dedication, of going hungry, going broke, just to maintain this artistry and to share it with the world. And I'm eternally thankful to Nirmala for blessing us, as she kept saying, with her presence, with her music. As I told her as she was walking out the door, I felt like, as she was talking about the ancestors blessing her, I felt that energy as well. It's really, we up here at work at 8 p.m., we talk about the power of classical music. That really is the power of classical music, to really center you and help you think and to help you have a little bit of perspective on what this is. And, they're so busy as they were, as we were saying goodbye to them, they were talking about how they're heading over to India here in a few weeks to share the music. So if you're listening to this from India, thank you very much. We have been very moved by this music, by your culture, and we appreciate We appreciate the opportunity so much.
You know how when we were talking about her vocalization and we talked about existing between the notes, you know how there is sound in between what we consider to be pleasing or acceptable,
Right.
and how improvisation is a large part of this music. Do you think that a modern orchestra could improvise and make it sound like that? Could a modern orchestra get in between notes like that and exist in that space?
Possibly. I mean, if you want to talk, logistically and pragmatically, double reed instruments, flutes, obviously trombones, anything without that, very very rigid way of creating the sound. Obviously, every stringed instrument, can make that sound. But I think there's a responsibility if orchestras want to explore that. They need to make sure they're doing it the right way and really doing their research, inviting Indian professionals, Indian artists in to consult and wow. How much broader will the world of classical music be if we dig into that? I was tearing up as you reminded me what Nirmala was saying about the space between the notes, because one of my teachers used to say that to me, the late great David Weiss. I mean, I loved him very much. He's one of the main people that helped shape my career. And one of the things he always said to me was that he believed that I would be successful in music because I paid attention to the space between the notes. And of course, as Nirmala and Boopathi were likening all of the music to life, you can't help but to think about, the space between point A to point B, in a day's time, in a week's time, in a lifetime, and how those spaces in between are where life really happens. And
I think you just stumbled across the title for this opus.
The Space Between?
The Space in Between.
All right, that's what this one will be called. So thank you for listening to The Space Between, Opus 24.
Sure.
Is this 24?
I think that before we wrap up here, we also have to acknowledge the fact that, see, normally the host would give a gift to somebody bringing in their instrument and talking about their life as a performer. She flipped the script on us, and showed up with a gift for us. So let's open this now while we're recording here.
Here's the paper rattling.
Okay, so she said there's chocolate that we're supposed to share.
Okay, so these are, this is a reed dispenser, Karma Scents, I think it says, and it's rose scented. I'm sure that's very beautiful.
Oh, so that's it. That's not the chocolate.
No, that's a...
All right, I'm not going to eat that.
And then there's what looks like a piece of art that hangs on the wall, an embroidered elephant with this beautiful pattern work there.
That would look good on your wall.
And then we both have packages of Lindor chocolates. So those will be very nice. Thank you so much, Nirmala. Thank you, Boopathi. What an incredible experience. If I can wrap up by saying anything, is that take time today to really go into yourself and think about the space between. Think about where you are and think about how you can make someone else's life a little better, because I feel like they made my life better today.
I agree with you.
So next time on TRILLOQUY.
Next time.
A little while ago, several months ago, an article was sweeping the internet. It's time to let classical music die. Well, that was written by a guy named Nibal Masood.
And you got him.
And he's going to be with us next time on TRILLOQUY, so be sure to tune in for that.
And if you would like to reach out, just send an email to TRILLOQY@AmericanPublicMedia.org. That's TRILLOQY @AmericanPublicMedia.org.
Namaste.